Hey, what up? What up? Everybody, it is Friday night, and we're here for Friday Night Fire. My name is Mike Phillips, and on my left, your right there, is Mr. Matt Koenig. We are here to get live, get biblical. We're here to motivate. What's the line?
Motivation,
Conversation.
and faith-based foundation. And
He
some
always remembers the faith-based
all the Asians.
anything with Asian in it. Motivation, inspiration, trying to lack condemnation
Yeah.
through conversation.
All I know is
One night, Matt's going to get into some gyration. No?
like this.
Okay.
I'm cabbage patching. That's a dance.
So,
How
hey,
else do you do that now?
thank you, everybody who's taken the time to join us this evening. I'm going to jump in here and just remind everybody that this show is sponsored by StreamYard. We'd suggest, please, go to join-streamyard.com. Check it out. You can get a free 14-day trial, and it is a fantastic platform that will allow you to get your message out across multiple platforms. So it's really fantastic.
Multiple platforms. I
And
feel
with
we should
that-
sing a jingle. StreamYard.
So we're headed into April. We're headed into a new series. Matt and I have had, when we started this, we kind of started the journey together on what's Friday Night Fire going to be, and we got into some really deep and good conversations. And then in March, we stepped back a little bit, had some friends that submitted some questions, had a friend on the show with us, great conversation there. And now we're headed into a new series we're gonna call Exploring the Bible. Dun dun dun.
But, which really means we're going into Exodus.
That is correct. So
Making
we're
an
going to
Exodus.
we're going to start exploring specifically the book of Exodus, and we may spend a month in this. We may spend 6 weeks. We may spend 90
A
days.
year.
And you know,
A year.
we could
40
spend
days
a-
and 40 nights we might spend, if you will. That was punny. That wasn't
That
even
was-
a pun. That was
that
just
was-
a really bad joke.
That's a Jesus. That's a dad. A Jesus. A
You
dad
just almost said,
Bible
like,
joke.
These nuts. That's what you almost said.
I did nothing of the
This
sort.
is totally going to be great. You
All
should
right.
try this
So
research.
here's one of the things that I realized, as it's been a really long time since I dove in and read Exodus. So I felt like you did this intentionally to me.
Well, so I'm going to tell you, I didn't do it because I knew you hadn't read it. I did it. What's up, Andrew? I did it because I've been listening to the Bema podcast,
Okay.
which is a life changer. Like, they look at studying the Bible from the Eastern perspective instead
Okay.
of doing it's like my friend Sean and I were talking about when we were moving yesterday. So I just I'll give you a snapshot of the nerdiness part that attracts me to what's going on there. So
Okay.
one of the things at the very beginning, when this started, which is like a bazillion episodes ago, they were talking about how in our Western mind, like we function through like, I see X, and in order for X to exist, I need to know how it got there. So here are the possible rationales. Like, we have a hard time taking a story and going, that story's got a great lesson. And in the Eastern mind, they don't think like, I have to solve this problem for God to exist. They go, God exists because I feel like God exists, right? Like, so in the storytellers in the Bible, in the Old Testament, especially because the New Testament is written from more of a Greek perspective, right? A little closer to like our thinking. But in the Old Testament, that's not the way they told stories. There are so many chiasms in the story, like just amazing things that take place. So I've gotten sucked into the Bema podcast. They dig into things in the Midrash a lot. And I'm just like, whoa, this is like the biblical equivalent to my Apple nerdiness, but way cooler because it's way more cool.
You do have a lot of Apple nerdiness, so that says a lot.
Yeah, I know. I'm right. I'm looking at the iPad with the Bible, iPhone. I've got the MacBook Air M1 dorked out behind the big 32-inch screen. Like, I'm an Apple, just a goober. But yeah, so I'm fascinated with what's going on in Exodus right now. Plus, I'm going to be honest with you. I think it speaks a lot to the mindset that a lot of people are having, from everything from the oppressive things that are going on in there to Moses not feeling good enough going out
Right.
of there. So like and Moses not wanting to be Hebrew after he left Egypt, like
Right.
love for circumcising his son. Like, there's so many things in there, these nuggets that when I read, because I was trying to read through the Bible in a year, I missed these little nuggets. So that's why I was like, hey, bro, let's dig in.
Well, No, and I love it. So I want to share something because I have a men's study Bible here, and it talks about. It specifically says, okay, so what's the book about? And so this is for those of you watching, and we are live on YouTube, on Facebook. We're on several different platforms. So, we'd love if you have a question or a comment, just drop it in there, and we'll try and get it up there on the screen and share. So if there's something that comes up as we're talking. So in Exodus, the way the study Bible reads, it says specifically, well, what's this book about? God delivers his people from Egyptian slavery and gives them his law. Here's what I think is really neat. It talks about perspective in the book, and the perspective specifically of, it says the Ten Commandments, right? And this is written from a masculine perspective, so I'll kind of read it from a global perspective, if I may. So it says, we understand the need for rules in sports, laws in society, and operating instructions for tools and machines. But very often we're tempted to think that when it comes to our private life, we can pretty much do what we want. The Ten Commandments remind us that we're made to operate according to the rules God set up. When we violate the rules, we hurt ourselves and others. We're made to live in fellowship with God. Though we sometimes feel we're all alone in this world, God doesn't want us to live like that. He's made it possible for us to have a relationship with him. That's where we find true fulfillment. So it's this little blurb there right at the beginning. So it lays the whole foundation, not only for the book of Exodus, and I know we won't necessarily get there tonight, right? But the reason I wanted to share it tonight is, like, I think that is so relevant to a lot of the things that are going on in our society right now, right? Right here where it says, hey, we need rules, we need laws, we need like moral rightness, moral uprightness, right? But so often people think, well, but if it's not in the public eye, it's okay. Well, what are the rules that are laid down?
Well, dude, that goes to, and this is, off topic, right? And for those who watch this for the first time, whether you're watching it after the fact, you jump in live on one of the platforms, Mike and I don't, like, other than shooting over, like, hey, let's wrestle with this, like, part of the Bible, we don't pre-converse. So we don't know what we're going to bring up. So when I say off topic, I don't mean off script because there's not a script. I do, however, have a little Bible blueprint thing for Exodus that I pulled up. But what you just said about, like, if it's not in the public eye, then we don't treat it like it's wrong, right? And that's one of the things. I was just having a dialogue with a friend the other day, and I'm like, and you and I have talked about this in the past, about how it drives me nuts that for some reason the church, and not just the Christian church, right? Other religions too, but they put homosexuality up as the super sin. And I'm like, yeah, it's a sin. No, you don't condone it, but it's like, but the dude who's like having an affair, or the dude that gambles away his whole family's thing, like, because it's not like in the public eye and visible, that's not as big a deal to them. And I'm like, and I've heard like people go, well, that's because somebody, if they're gay, they identify as gay and they're living in their sin. I'm like, dude, when you're banging somebody else instead of your wife, you're living in your sin. Right. You're just not walking around letting people see it. Like, just because you're ashamed of it now, like, it's, now it's like not as bad. It's like, so I think there is definitely some hypocrisy in how that functions, and it does tie into the world. And I would say, arguably, the church looks a whole lot like the world that it's supposed to be setting a good example for. Sure. In some of the examples it's setting. Now, that being said, there are a lot of great folks following Jesus that don't behave like that do love people, that do realize we're a broken group of suckers. So I don't know. But I do think Exodus shows us some really cool examples of wrong acting by the hero Moses, and some good decisions too. A lot of really bad ones.
So why don't you frame that up for people, or if you would, because what Matt, the one piece, literally the single sentence that Matt and I exchanged prior to tonight's show, he said, "Hey, let's wrestle with like Exodus 2, right? I think you said 11 to 25, somewhere in there." So kind of, prior to that, and if you guys are not familiar, if the people that are watching aren't familiar, I was actually going to go through and frame it up prior to this.
Go ahead, frame it up, dude.
Well, but I don't think I'm going to. I would prefer, and what I would recommend is, if you need some clarification from what Matt and I are talking about when we're moving forward, because we want to pick it up and move forward from there, two things. One, reach out to each of us. Either one of us, message us, DM, that kind of stuff, if you want to have a conversation. More importantly, pick up a Bible and go read Exodus 1.
That's the way to do it. I mean, I'm happy to dialogue with anyone, but yes, I would say get in your Bible, it'll help.
Yeah, So getting into that, Exodus 2:11. So kind of 2:1 through 10. I'll frame this part up just so they
Okay.
know where we're
Perfect.
headed, and then you pick up from 11.
All
So
right.
1 through 10, obviously, when the Hebrews were in Egypt, the Israelites were in Egypt, then one of the rules or laws from Pharaoh was that they said, well, there's so many of these Israelites, we don't want them to come and end up taking over, right? And so what happens is, and I'm giving you the very layman version, right? He's like, hey, we don't want these guys to take over. So all of the males that are born, he gave instruction to the midwives, said, all the males that are born, you have to go and eliminate them. You can let the girls live, but you got to kill the boys, right? Short version. Then the midwives who believe in God say, well, no, we're or who are faithful to God say, well, we're not going to do that. So they come up with the story. They're like, man,
I love this story.
yeah. They come up with the story. They're like, well, here's the Pharaoh's like, why didn't you do what I told you to? And they're like, well, see, what had happened was right.
Really do
Right.
that.
What had happened was these Hebrew women, right? These Israelite women, they're like I don't remember I can look.
They're
it
like
up.
pushing them out like so fast.
Yeah, they're so
robust.
quick. They've already had the baby by the time we get there. They're so fast. And he's like, well, okay, fine. He's like, fine. You have my favor. Go drown him in the river, right?
Yeah.
He's like, okay, you guys are okay. You got to drown the babies in the river then. And so, kind of the prelude to Moses, and I don't remember specifically where 11 picks up, so you got to stop me if I'm there.
Oh, 11 picks up where it says after he's grown up. So,
Okay, so at that point, what happens is Moses's mom, pre-Moses, he's baby Moses. She says, okay, well, I don't want him to get killed, and she builds this little raft, tar raft. I don't remember what kind of raft. Puts baby Moses on it, floats him down the river. The older sister, because
now
she was allowed to live,
Moses basket by many people.
yeah, the Moses basket.
Who puts their babies in rivers? I don't even get that.
So he's cruising down the river, chilling, getting a tan, right? And
Tanner,
the sister's
probably.
watching. Well, then what happens is Pharaoh's daughter, the princess, sees this baby floating down the river. She's like, "Whoa,
She's down
baby!"
there taking a bath.
Yeah, she's
like,
out
"Yeah,
taking
I'm
a bath.
in
She's
the
like,
river."
"Hey, baby in the river," right? So she ends up rescuing Moses. Long story, maybe a little bit shorter, but you should
Daughter
go
of
read
God
it.
trying to kill Moses. So good.
Yeah, so tries to kill him. Then the princess rescues Moses. The daughter who sees this happen says, "Hey, should I go get like a breastfeeding mom, right? To take care of the baby." So she goes and gets Moses's mom, right? Isn't that right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
so
She's
she
like,
gets
"Hey,
Moses's mom. She's like,
you
"Hey, there's a
mind
baby
that
here.
I'm
You should."
lactating?" And
What's
she's
that?
like, "Yeah, you do that." And she kept him for like 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't it like 3 years?
I think 3 years, and then thereafter, the princess adopts Moses, and we pick up from where Matt's going to run with it.
Yeah, so there's some cool things in this, and I want to point out like that I love. So Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe at the Nile, while her servant girls walked along the riverbank. She saw the thing of basket in the weeds, right? She says, "Oh, there's a little boy." She felt sorry for him. This is one of the Hebrew boys. It's interesting because almost all the modern translations leave out like the part where, like she saw, like, or nobody talks about this. How would she know it was a Hebrew boy? Because of the snips, man.
Right.
Circumcision. So that's the only way she identified that he was a Hebrew boy. But I find it interesting because original translations basically tell you that she saw this about him. But the other thing that's weird in this part of the story is that when Moses' sister, it says to Pharaoh's daughter, "Should I go?" Like, pause. Is it normal that Pharaoh's daughter's taking a bath and like this Hebrew kid's just hanging out watching? Like, isn't that a weird part of the story that we don't talk about? Like, you get that her servants would be with her, but the picture we're getting painted is like Moses' sister sneaking through the reeds, kind of watching, like, where's the basket? And then all of a sudden, she just like out of the blue pops up. It's like, "Hey, is that a Hebrew baby? Do you happen to need someone lactating? Maybe I know it. Maybe I know a gal." Like, that is a weird.
I know a guy. Right.
To be in the story, right? That caught my attention when I was reading through Exodus.
So what's your take on that then?
So here's the real deal. The honest answer is I do not know, but details are in there for a reason.
Sure.
And so I don't know, but I wonder if it's it's just an interesting fact. Like Pharaoh's daughter had no shame in being naked. And when I
Sure.
see that, it's kind of like a callback to pre-sin, right? Like there was no shame. And I do not think that those tie together that way. It just made me think of that because I was like, okay, what stands out to me?
Interesting.
Well, she wasn't embarrassed about being naked in front of a stranger. You had somebody, what's up, Anthony? You had
What's up, dude?
you had Moses' daughter or sister like peeking through the reeds and then just pops out of nowhere like, oh, hey, naked lady with a baby in a basket. So I thought those were all weird. And then the crazy part is
Dude, I just stop there for a second because I love the way you. I seriously love the frame, the way you frame things. Oh, hey, naked lady with a baby in a basket. Who says that?
That's well, me. But that's what's happening in the story, right?
Sure.
But the other interesting thing is, right, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, right, when he grew older. The other translation is like about 3 years.
Sure.
But the other cool thing is that so not only did God provide by keeping Moses alive, but God provided for Moses' whole family because in doing so, it says, Pharaoh's daughter told her, so she went and called the boy's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child and nurse him for me. I will pay your wages.
I forgot that. Yeah.
So she's paying for her to raise this child who's already her child that was supposed to get killed. Now, those are the fun parts of the story. This is the part, though,
Sure.
where we kind of shift gears. And this is the part I thought it would be really interesting to dig into tonight and let people kind of marinate on, and then we can wrestle with it a little, but then hopefully next week we can wrestle it with more. But on verse 11, it says, years later after, and I'm reading from the Christian Standard Bible for anybody, it says, years later after Moses had grown up, he went out to his own people, and he observed their forced labor. Pause. This was something brought up in the Bema podcast that I'm going to be honest and say I've never recognized this until a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Okay, so picture this for a moment. Pharaoh said, all Hebrew boys be killed, right? Which means everybody Moses' age, right? So a ton of them are dead. Not only is Moses not dead, but Moses is living like a king, relatively speaking. So be Moses for a minute. Think about this. The whole group you're with, everybody else dies except you. What's going on inside of you right now? How are you feeling? Like think about, you're all on an airplane, the plane crashes, you're the only one that lives. What's that called?
There's guilt.
Yeah.
I mean, I think big time guilt. There's the question, which I think arises later. I don't remember where the burning bush comes in because I skimmed through as we were talking about tonight. But I think even it's almost like the prelude to the burning bush where he directly says, "Why me?"
Like and so this is really that's a really interesting thing that you bring up, and we are going to have fun in the burning bush because Joe Rogan has a great theory about it, and it's actually not too far off of some possibilities. But what stood out to me was what you just said. Like there's probably some survivor's guilt, and that's what they were talking about in Bema. Is like not only might he have survivor's guilt because he's one of the only survivors, right? Because how many other mothers may have been able to smuggle their kid? Who knows? But also, he's likely got Hebrew people that have to serve him and wait on him like the Egyptians. So he's not only alive, but hey, your family members that got murdered, by the way, I'm alive and you're going to serve me and treat me like a king. So I think by observing that, it starts to help it make a little more sense about what's about to happen. So he saw an Egyptian striking a Hebrew, one of his people. So at this point in the story, Moses is acknowledging, and by the way, it's thought to be that Moses is the author of Exodus. He wouldn't, like Genesis wouldn't have been in writing yet because it's not like he would have written it because he wasn't really following God. So it wasn't like there were some scriptures for Moses to cling to either here. But he identified as a Hebrew, right? So it says an Egyptian striking the Hebrew, one of his people. It's a big deal that it says one of his people. Yep. Looking all around and seeing no one, he struck the Egyptian dead and hid him in the sand. Now, what stands out in this part? Looking all around and seeing no one, he struck the Egyptian dead and hid him in the sand. What stands out in that?
I mean, for me, the simplistic version is first, it's like he checked. Like he knew he was about to do wrong.
Yeah, but here, he saw what?
I'm sorry?
It says he saw no one, right?
Right.
But if he saw no one, well, who was the Egyptian guy whipping, beating? So there was a witness there. Even though it says he saw no one, we kind of tend to think like Moses ran up in secret and like whacked the guy. But he basically looked around thinking, there's nobody that could judge me on this, no Egyptian, no other Egyptian. Because the Hebrew guy...
But there's still the dude being beaten.
Yeah, and of course, if you're being beaten and someone saves you, you're going to have gratitude, right? So Moses, what we see here is Moses didn't have a second thought. Like, I'm gonna like about how the...
I'm gonna step in and save that guy.
Yeah, I'm gonna step up. I'm gonna save this guy, and he's going to be grateful for this. Or at the very least, he thought he's not going to be upset about what's about to happen, right?
Sure.
But then the next day, so it's like, this isn't like 10 years later they forgot their history kind of deal. The next day he went out and saw two Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, okay, he could clearly identify somebody was in the wrong here, and he says, why are you attacking your neighbor?
Yeah, why are you fighting your brother?
Yeah, and verse 14, who made you commander and judge over us? The man replied, are you planning to kill me as you did the Egyptian? Let's just breathe on that piece of scripture. Who was the only witness to Moses killing the Egyptian?
The only witness would have been the guy that was being beaten, and it leads you to believe, man, I hadn't even considered that. So now think of you nailed that. So the guy's being beaten, Moses steps in, kills the Egyptian, saves dude. The next day, dude's sitting beating on somebody else. It's got to be the same guy. No, it's got to be the same guy.
Or that guy. I didn't look at it from that perspective. I love that you did, because that also ties to the parable later, the story we hear about the guy that was forgiven of much and then goes and holds the other guy accountable. Bro, I wonder if that is a chiasm from Exodus to the New Testament. That is brilliant.
So that's the thing where he says in the New Living Translation, it says, why are you beating up your friend? Moses said to the one who had started the fight.
Yep.
Right? The man replied, who appointed you our prince and judge? Are you going to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday? So what if it's the same dude?
Yeah, see, so I was looking at it from the perspective that the guy who got saved was so ungrateful that he went and blabbered to everybody. But it makes even more sense from the perspective you just shared. Like, what if it is the same guy? Are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian? Because no one else was around. So only that guy getting beat knew. So here we are in the thick of this. Moses just saved a guy's life, and his response is, if it's the guy, or if it's not the guy, that guy went and blabbered. So right after doing something to try and save his people, what he thought was the right thing to do, and arguably I would do the same, you would do the same, we would think we would anyway. So his heart was in the right spot. He had a good intention. He wanted to save someone, and this is how he gets repaid, with kindness. And after that, it says, then Moses became afraid and thought, what I did is certainly known. And now this is why I say it may not be the same guy, because he said what I did is certainly known. Now the thing is, he's referring to the fact, if it was the same guy, now the second guy knows, right, that he was quarreling with. But either way, now we know it's no longer a secret what Moses did. Now the interesting thing to me, and the next thing that stood out, is it doesn't say how it got back to Pharaoh. But we know Moses didn't take it back to Pharaoh.
No,
so let's take the ungratefulness for being saved one step further. One of these cats, or someone that they told.
What's the very next line?
Yeah, because Pharaoh finds out in the next line. So that means, like, it doesn't say word spread throughout the village. It doesn't say, Moses marinated on it for a month. It doesn't say Moses went back and professed to Pharaoh, hey, I did this thing. Will you forgive me? We go literally from Moses became afraid and thought, what I did is certainly known, to when Pharaoh heard about this, he tried to kill Moses. So there are a lot of conclusions we could draw. And this is not exegesis. This would be eisegesis, like reading things into the story because God left stuff out. God leaves stuff out because we probably don't need the details. But I still think it's fascinating to go, wow, either the guy that Moses protected ran his mouth and was like, oh, Moses killed an Egyptian yesterday, everybody, which is really ungrateful and stupid since you just got saved. Or he was the same guy now taking another guy to task after getting saved himself, which, again, does parallel the New Testament story of the debt forgiven, and I just love that those like run parallel like that.
So
But
here's a
anyway,
question.
yeah.
Let me ask you this.
Wow.
Since this story, so I mean, because that's the thing, like you said, you know, you or I would do the same thing. We'd step in and protect somebody. So does this, and I mean, since Moses stepped in and killed the Egyptian, buried him in the sand, he obviously knew what he was doing was wrong, buried him in the sand, but the death predates the Ten Commandments.
Yeah, that's an
So is it
interesting
a sin?
perspective too. So here's the thing. Interesting perspective to wrestle with. And while it predates God giving Moses the Ten Commandments,
Mm-hmm.
the question I would ask, and is, I don't know that, was it wrong to God? I don't know, right? I mean, he saved one of God's people, albeit they've been in captivity for 400 years for being idiots. That is a great question. One could look back to what Cain did to Abel and God, casting him out for
True.
murder.
Yep.
And could say, God did kind of set a precedent that murder was bad in Genesis.
It was implied.
But it brings an interesting point, though, because what we don't read in any part of this, as we'll dig into even deeper next Friday, we don't see God in any way condemn him for what he did to the Egyptian.
Right.
That being said, though, we don't see God verbally do it, but here's a question. Moses was living like an Egyptian. He was living a comfortable life. Everyone that would argue that it was God's divine hand that saved Moses' life and gave him the life he had.
Sure.
But Moses then, in thinking he was doing something good, took someone's life. And what happens? All of a sudden, the good life Moses
He's
had,
got to run and it's stripped from him.
yeah, he no longer has his life. As a matter of fact, he almost didn't have his physical life because Pharaoh was going to kill him. And this is part of why I wanted to dig into this, because this makes me think about today. And so I'm gonna point it out on both sides of what's happening and the stupidity of the political infighting. All summer,
Here it comes, people.
yeah, but I'm going to keep it simple. All summer, we saw people in a noble response of feeling, hey, man, George Floyd got killed. He didn't need to die, which is true. He didn't need to. Like, there were other ways it could have went about, right? We won't argue about, right, wrong, law stuff. We'll just talk about somebody died who didn't have to die. And
Sure.
in the spirit of wanting justice, people took to the streets, which still isn't a bad thing. But then they started hurting and killing other people in the name of trying to do something good, we'll say, okay? But we also see on the conservative right, I can't tell you how many Facebook posts and things I see with people looking because they're concerned about losing the right to own guns, which I'm not arguing with that freedom, right? Like, cool. Like, I own one, whatever. But I see all these things being shared, and a lot of the examples are, what if somebody who's a bad guy is hurting my neighbor, though, and I need to put them down? What if somebody who's a bad guy breaks in my house and I need to put them down? And a couple of words stand out to me in so many of these posts. I keep saying put them down. I'm like, that's what you say about a dog, an animal, right? So we're talking about other humans. I think a lesson that I seem to be learning in Exodus, maybe, is when we see what happened to Moses, even in the name of nobility, the action of stopping what's happening, I think is good. But I think a lesson that we learn is when you do take a life, though, it's not just their life that's getting taken. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think we've got to be conscious of that, because as things seem to be starting to simmer in some areas, you know how that feeling of a calm before a storm?
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I feel like in America, we had a storm, right, pre-election, and it seemed like the storm came from one side of the political aisle. But my challenge is now we have the other side of the political aisle behaving the same way that they just condemned for a year. And it's starting to fester and build. And I think I think this is the calm before the storm. And I wish people would look at this and go, perhaps violently taking people on is not the answer. And the reason I think this hits me so strong is so many people on the conservative right are the same people that claim Jesus as their property, is the way they talk about him, but they claim to be followers of Jesus. And I'm like, man, if we claim to be followers of Jesus, then we are to, at all costs, attempt to seek peace. Don't mean don't defend. Don't mean, let someone break in your home and rape your wife and children. I would kill them too. But there's a gravity that comes with having to do that. And I think in America right now, that gravity is not there. People are just like, oh yeah, somebody breaks in, dude, I'll put them down. And I know I've said stuff like that, but when you look at like what happened with Moses, when you look at the gravity of this, like what he did led to a lot bigger stuff. All right. But we look at it now and we think, well, when someone's bad, if I carry out a punishment on them, it's deserved. But then you can go to church on Sunday and be like, oh, thank you, Jesus, for taking away my sins. And it's like, well, our pastor said, water can't flow through the pipe without it getting wet. Well, are we being Christians that we're putting a plug on the end of the pipe and just hoping all the water just stays flowing into us? And are we not extending that grace and mercy past? I think Moses' story gives us a little bit of a real life example of why we should do everything to not kill if we can. So that's what stands out to me. But also what stands out is, you ever hear the saying, and maybe we could wrestle with this for next week, but you ever hear the saying, like people always talk about like, oh, the God in the Old Testament was so angry and wrathful, right? He was a wrathful God then. That's when there was judgment. And then we see the grace in Jesus, right? Have you
Yeah. No, I hear that all the time. Absolutely.
Something amazing. Gosh, trying to remember the Hebrew word for it, and I cannot to save my life. There are a couple times, 4, where this Hebrew word is used regarding. No, that's not the right word. Anyways, in the Old Testament, what we really see is every time that the people cried out to God, He answered. I think I'm getting excited. I think this week, as we dig into Exodus, we're going to start seeing a lot more of the grace of God and the mercy that He's actually having for His people. Instead of angry, wrathful, if we start to focus on the details of the story. And I'll next week, I'll bring you some of those Hebrew words.
Yeah, I like the Hebrew words. So here's a couple of things that I would challenge our watchers or our listeners to. And what's interesting, here's when you said that, and you probably can't. Oh, that's mine.
You can probably see it better than trying to hold up that.
But here, there's where it says where you're saying this sums it up perfectly. What's the point of Exodus? And it says God loves His people enough to demand holiness.
So
there's an interesting tidbit from here.
That is an interesting piece of info. We can we'll wrap. We might as well just wrap Exodus 2. That way we can start fresh next week because there's not a lot left. But it says, when Pharaoh heard about this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. They came to draw water. And I have a note literally highlighted. Why does this detail matter? The fact that he had 7 daughters. They came to draw water, filled the troughs to water their father's flock. Then some shepherds arrived and drove them away. That, to me, also interesting detail. Why did shepherds drive away Jethro's daughters? But anyways, I still don't understand that either. It says, but Moses came to their rescue. So we see Moses, again, being a hero. Right? So we're like, man, we're like 10, not even 10 verses down, and you're being a hero again, Moses. It says, and watered their flock. So he came to the rescue and he watered the flock. A little different than his heroics in the previous thing. It says, when they returned to their father Reuel, he asked, why have you come back so quickly? They answered, an Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock. Here's what stands out really crazily. This is what makes me think it was pretty immediate that Moses had to get out of Dodge because these women mistook him for an Egyptian, right? Yep. Like they wouldn't have known he was Hebrew because they wouldn't have seen the snips going on. So here he is dressed in Egyptian garb, basically it kind of paints a picture that he hightailed it out of there.
Sure.
But it also shows like in spite of him already being in fear and running and hiding, like if you're in hiding, let me ask you this. If you're in hiding, would you
I'm
want to
the
draw?
expert on being in hiding, so it's perfect
Yeah,
that you're
right.
asking me this.
And I love what Anthony said, by the way.
Yeah, this is
God,
really good.
yeah, for those that listen to the podcast, God brings grace. People bring their own trials. God gives hope and shines light on the faces of those who believe. That's beautiful. And it's so true, bro. So true.
Absolutely spot on.
I love that. So what's interesting is, let me ask you this. If you were in hiding, right, you're like, oh man, I know that the most powerful guy in the world, as far as you know, is coming to kill me, and he's got a huge army. Some shepherds say, get out of our water. And you see this as you're hiding behind a rock. Are you going to come? Like, what do you honestly think that somebody in hiding is going to do?
I mean, again, most people, especially if there's multiple shepherds and one of you and you're already being chased, they stay hiding because what's the reason?
Why were trying to rob them or violate them? It says they drove them away. They were just like, get out of here. And what does Moses do?
He takes this righteous stance that he's like, you guys might not be the Egyptian. I don't have to kill you, but I'm not afraid to. Get out of here. I don't know how the conversation went, obviously. That's my own dialogue.
So let's paint the picture, though, because I think it may give us a little more of a visual into the conversation.
Well, and here's
multiple guys, but what was
before
Moses
you say something?
Okay,
that's what I was going to say. Before you say something, so he stands up and he's like, Superman stands, right? Dun da da da, and they're like, "Oh crap, an Egyptian, get out!" Right?
That's what it tends to paint that picture, right? Because why else would multiple people, right? So the Midianites knew the Egyptians were like ballers, and they knew like we're not going to go against them. But what else then do we know about Moses? Now, just a day ago, Moses struck down the Egyptian because he was beating one of his what?
One of his brothers, one of his peers, yeah.
So Moses identified as a what?
As a Hebrew.
Yeah, but now what's Moses identifying as?
As an Egyptian.
Interesting. Yes, now we're digging deep into the mud.
Interesting.
Oof. So Moses is running away from the Egyptians, right? Now, the Egyptians know he's a Hebrew, so they're looking for a Hebrew, Moses the Hebrew, but Moses hasn't shaken off his Egyptian garb. Moses hasn't, likely, because we don't see a detail that Moses changed, right? It says he ran and he sat down by a rock. So Moses, in trying to escape Egypt, still didn't want to identify as a Hebrew, is the exegete, like what we can read into the story, it seems like, because when the daughters go back and tell their dad, who did they say they get saved by?
An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds, they answered, and he drew water for us and watered our flocks. So here's what's interesting. I took this a totally different way, because then the father says, then where is he, ? Right? One of the things we don't get from the scripture is the emotional context. We read the words. So it's like, oh, well, to the dad says, then where is he? The father asks, why did you leave him there? Invite him. What if his initial, because there's probably a lot more to the conversation, right? What if the first, then where is he, is a question out of fear? Like, oh crap, an Egyptian. Like, what if he took the same stance as the shepherds? And then, they go on, says, well, then why did you leave him there? Because to me, there's always been some missing piece of the conversation in that
maybe because of the word then, and we'd have to look at the original language, but saying why then did you leave him behind, the man behind, does make it sound like he's like, well, I mean, if he did this, like, then, like, why didn't you invite him? Like, but the gap between so where is he and why did you leave him behind, if there were a gap, I don't know if there's anything that tells us there was, but I don't know if it was more out of like a hospitality, like, look,
he saved you. Well, and then by the end of that, even he says, hey, invite him to come eat with us. So that all happens in like 3 sentences.
Yeah. Now, if Moses wrote Exodus, either A, he didn't know the conversation because he wasn't home with them. So this is what he got from his later wife. Once
she comes out and she's like, hey, dad said to invite you over. You want to come eat?
Let's get married.
Yeah.
Because that's usually how the writing is.
Oh, it's like one
when
more
it is,
paragraph. No,
why
keep.
did you then leave the man behind? Invite him to dinner. Moses agreed to stay with the man, and he gave his daughters Zipporah to Moses in marriage.
Yeah.
I think what you're saying brings a lot of merit. I doubt this all
Yeah.
happened in that
Hey,
moment.
then where is he? Why did you leave him there? Why didn't you bring him back so we could eat and get married?
Right, because then the next sentence says she gave birth to a son, so we know that didn't happen overnight. But
Right.
here's a question that stands out. So let's assume for a moment, because the reality is back then, the moment a woman started menstruating, like dad was looking to find her a husband and getting ready to play the trade game, right? Like, let's make a deal. So obviously his daughters are of marrying age, at least Zipporah was. But the interesting thing that stands out to me in that little section there is when it says Moses agreed to stay with the man, he gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. Now, I wonder, because we don't know, right? Like, was it at dinner? Like, well, where are you going? He's like, oh, I'm on the road. Hey, you could stay with us. Did he give his daughter to Moses in marriage because Moses just saved her and said, like, hey, as repayment for saving my family, my flock, whatever?
Right.
Did he give her in marriage to Moses thinking Moses was an Egyptian and that it was going to come with some benefits? Like, we don't know, and we don't get some insight. But
Egyptians with benefits.
Yeah, like, yes, and we don't know. Right? So, like, those are interesting things that stand out to me. It's like, why would he be so willing? Was it because he was grateful that he saved not only her, but the other daughters? Was it because he knew his flock got watered and he was trying to repay him? Was it because he thought he was an Egyptian who could give him something great and trade? We don't ever get a picture of that. All we know is he saves them, he gets dinner, he gets to stay there, he gets to get married, and he has a son who he names Gershom, for he said, I have been a resident alien in a foreign land. So it's interesting because it seems in this, we wonder, when he's calling himself a resident alien in a foreign land, is he now saying, I'm an Egyptian in a foreign land of Midian? Is he saying, I was a Hebrew in a foreign land of Egypt? Is he saying, I'm a Hebrew in a foreign land of Midian? But all we know is, because there's nothing that says it, but all we know is it says, after a long time, the king of Egypt died, Pharaoh, the Israelites groaned because of their difficult labor, and they cried out. And this is the beautiful ending. Yeah. They cried out, and their cry for help. So this is weird, because when you see something repeated over and over, it means something, right? So it says, and they cried out, and their cry for help because of the difficult labor ascended to God. So they cried out, and because they were in such a bad spot, it ascended to God. And it says, and God heard their groaning and remembered his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and with Jacob, and saw the Israelites. God saw the Israelites, and God knew. This is what's so cool. 400 years. This seems to paint a picture that over that 400 years, they didn't cry out to God. We don't know, but I would say based on reading the text, and it's saying because of the spot they were in, God heard their cry and remembered his covenant.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened for the previous 400 years? Did they not cry out to God? Because it says they cried out in a certain way and God heard them. And the same, they were talking about this in Bama, the same word used for that crying out is like used only a couple times, and every time it's used, and God heard and God knew. Like, whew, look at our prayers. God, please bring healing of this cancer. But if you don't, I trust you will. How many times are we really saying, but I trust your will? And how many times are we saying, just in case you can't really come through or won't come through, I don't want you to look bad or me to look bad, so I'm going to save you from yourself by giving you an out in this prayer.
Interesting.
When do we cry out like broken, like the Hebrew, like everything is on the line, I'm going to die, I need you. I can tell you when my buddy got healed from cancer, that was the crying out that we had. And I'm not saying we did anything. God brings healing. But I can tell you that the crying out was there. I just wonder how much, when people say, I've prayed and God doesn't answer, how many of us have really been crying out in that type of anguish? What we see in the Old Testament is a God who when you cry out to him, he knows.
Yeah, he hears.
I love it. That's it. So we're done with Exodus.
Well, we're done with Exodus 2. So here is my challenge for those of you that tune in week after week. If you're watching now, here's what I would recommend. Grab a Bible, go online to the Bible app, go to Bible.com, sign up, it's free, right?
Yeah.
But go read Exodus 1. You could recap in your favorite version on what Matt and I just went through in Exodus 2. Probably read through Exodus 3 because we're going to continue this conversation. I think we just kind of keep going from where we left off. But again, if you are curious, if you are like, hey, I've got questions about this now and so forth, message Matt or I. Both of us would love to have a dialogue with you.
And if you need a Bible, so Dara and I have decided to start doing this. If you need a Bible, like a paper Bible, and you don't have one, shoot a message to Mike Rye. Just let us know. But my wife and I will buy you one, and we'll ship it to you. Not like a free plus shipping or any of that crap. Like we'll just buy it. But if you need one, we got you.
Free plus shipping.
Yeah, it's not like I'm not going to bring you to like an upsell offer, and then like it's not a sales funnel. Literally,
sign up here, free Bible. And then
your name, your address, a Bible goes from Amazon directly to you.
That's good, dude. No, that's great.
Yeah, trying to help make disciples, which means make students, and you can't make students if they don't have the school books. So there we go.
Absolutely.
Boom, that should have been like a on stage pastor moment for like a clip. Can't make students if you don't have school books. Come on.
Bam. So with that, I'll match Matt's offer. If you need a Bible, and like you said, pick a version. I would definitely recommend. I will tell you, since Matt and I connected doing this, I like the NLT version. It still reads easier for me.
Yep.
I do really like the Message version. That is something that truly I had not like deliberately avoided. But I had never really gotten into it. But as you and I talked about it, that is a really good version. So yeah, I agree with Matt. Message one of us and let us know.
Kind of ties to the to what they were talking about on Bema though, about the difference in how we view things. In a lot of the English translation, it's about it's not about the story, but with Eastern writers, it's about the story. I love it because the Message preserves the story. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't care what English version you have. You should still, if you really want to dig deep, get a concordance and dig into the original language. So, but if you want to know what the Bible means, not get a wrong translation, get the truth out of it, the Message does an amazing job of doing that. And I would tell anybody that's reading those, start in the New Testament, because the fact is, you really got to dig in the Old Testament to understand what's happening. True. Because the writing style of the Hebrews is it's very far removed from the writing style of us. And the Greek writing is a lot closer to the way we do stuff in English. So
absolutely.
Yeah, there's that.
Hey, with that, thank you everybody who tuned in, shared a comment, shared some thoughts. We love you. God bless you. We'll see you next week. Make sure and subscribe to my channel and Matt's channel, and we'll see you back here in 7 and 7.
Yeah, and happy Easter.
Yeah. Hey, today is good. Yeah, today's Good Friday. So have a great Easter Sunday. Have a great Easter weekend.
You too, bro. We're doing a little watch party Easter night. We're gonna watch the season opener of season 2 for The Chosen.
Nice.
We're inviting some friends over for some Easter watch party.
It'll be awesome. We'll see you guys next week.
Love you, bro.